At the very bottom of the ocean, deeper than sunlight has ever reached, there are places crowded with thousands of living things, packed tightly together like a busy city. Tall worms sway gently in the current. Clams and shrimp cover the rocks in thick clusters. This is happening in total darkness, at a spot with no sunlight at all, not even a tiny bit ever. This should not be possible. Almost all life on Earth needs sunlight, one way or another. Plants use sunlight to make food. Animals eat plants or eat other animals that ate plants. Sunlight is supposed to be the starting point for nearly everything alive. So how can a whole crowd of animals live and grow in a place that has never once seen a single ray of light? Most people would guess these animals must simply be eating scraps that slowly drift down from the sunny water far above, like leftover crumbs falling from a table high overhead. That seems like a reasonable idea. After all, some deep-sea creatures really do survive this way, eating tiny bits of food drifting down from the surface. But that guess does not explain what is happening here. The amount of food drifting down that far is small, far too small to support a crowd this thick and this busy. If these animals were only eating leftover crumbs from above, this spot should look mostly empty, not packed full of life. So something else, something local, must be feeding this entire crowd instead. Here is the real answer. Deep down on the ocean floor, in certain spots, cracks in the earth release very hot water full of minerals and chemicals. Chemicals that would be dangerous or even deadly to most living things. But a special kind of tiny living thing, far too small to see with just your eyes, has learned to do something remarkable with those chemicals. Instead of using sunlight for energy, the way a plant does, these tiny living things use the chemicals themselves as their energy source. In simple terms, they eat the chemicals coming out of the cracks and use that energy to build their own food without ever needing sunlight at all. Think about how a plant works in a sunny garden. A plant takes in sunlight, water, and air and turns them into food it can use to grow. These tiny living things near the hot cracks are doing something surprisingly similar, just with a different starting ingredient. Instead of sunlight, they take in certain chemicals from the hot water. Instead of leaves catching light, they have their own tiny built-in systems for grabbing energy out of those chemicals instead. The end goal is exactly the same either way, turning raw energy into real, usable food. This matters because these tiny living things become the true starting point of this entire crowded neighborhood, the same job sunlight and plants normally do everywhere else in the world. Once you have living things that can turn chemicals into food, you suddenly have a full meal sitting at the bottom of the ocean, ready for other animals to eat, grow, and multiply around. Some animals here eat these tiny chemical eating helpers directly, filtering them straight out of the water. But one especially strange animal takes this idea even further. A certain tall, tube-shaped worm living near these hot cracks has no mouth and no stomach at all. Instead, its whole body is packed full of these same tiny chemical eating helpers, living safely inside its own tissue. The worm gives them a safe home and carries chemicals to them from the water outside. In return, the tiny helpers make food and share that food directly with the worm from the inside. The worm never actually eats a single bite in the normal sense. Its whole body has become a walking, living kitchen instead. This kind of deep partnership is not something either side could easily manage alone. The tiny helpers need a safe, steady home, protected from the open water and from being eaten by something else. The worm needs food, but has completely given up the normal tools most animals use to get it, like a mouth or a stomach. By combining forces, each side gets exactly what it is missing from the other, and neither one has to do the whole job by itself. This same basic trick, hosting tiny chemical-eating helpers inside your own body, shows up in other animals living near these same hot cracks. Certain clams and mussels do this too, keeping the tiny helpers tucked safely inside their gills, feeding off the food those helpers make. even certain shrimp living in these dark. Hot waters are believed to raise these same tiny helpers on the outside of their own bodies, almost like a small, personal garden of food growing right on their skin, ready to be gently scraped off and eaten whenever needed. There is danger built into this whole system too, and it is part of what makes it so strange. The very same chemicals these tiny helpers use for energy would poison most other living things almost instantly. Because of this, animals living here often need special ways to carry these dangerous chemicals safely through their own blood without being harmed, almost like carrying fire in a special container built just for that one job. Very few places on Earth force life to solve a problem quite this dangerous just to get a meal. Zooming out, this whole story changes how we should think about what life actually needs to survive. For a very long time, people assumed sunlight was the one thing every living community on Earth truly depended on, directly or indirectly. But these dark, hot corners of the ocean floor prove that is not always true. All life really needs is some steady source of energy and the right building blocks to use it. Sometimes that energy comes from the sun. And sometimes it turns out it can come from cracks in the Earth instead, releasing heat and chemicals into total darkness. This idea matters beyond just the ocean floor too. If life on Earth can find a way to survive with no sunlight at all, using nothing but heat and chemicals rising from deep underground, it opens up a whole new way of thinking about where else life might be able to exist, even on other worlds that never receive any sunlight of their own. A dark, cold, sunless place does not automatically mean an empty, lifeless place. Sometimes it just means life had to find a completely different starting point. So somewhere far below the sunlit surface of the ocean, in a place that has been completely dark since long before any of us were born, hot mineral-rich water rises quietly from cracks in the sea floor. Around it, tall worms sway gently back and forth. Clams sit packed together in thick clusters. And an entire crowded neighborhood of life quietly goes on living, fed not by sunlight from above, but by heat and chemicals rising steadily from below.